And welcome everybody to the podcast series with Stephen Bayliss. I call myself the Artful Archer. I don't know if you find that funny, Mark. I'm with a wonderful guest today called Marc Laurenson. Little bit about Mark. I attended Mark's school. It was the Sydney Astrology School. I think it was about 10 or 11 years ago. And I met Mark there. Mark's a brilliant astrologer amongst many other things, but his passion for astrology is fantastic, and his knowledge is second to none. And so I just thought I'd get on and do a bit of an interview with Mark. And luckily he agreed. So how are you today, Mark?
I'm really well, thanks, Steve.
You're
Thank you so
looking
much
well.
for inviting me. I'm looking forward to talking.
Excellent. So Mark runs Sydney Astrology School. He does personalized readings. He does workshops and webinars all over the world. Travels. I've seen recently you've traveled, I think, to America or.
Yeah, just came back late last year from Colorado, where I was one of the speakers at the ESA conference, which is one of the big international conferences over there. So I was thrilled to be chosen to speak. So that was a big deal for me.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah, just did that end of last year.
Excellent. So I got to say that I got heaps out of when I learnt from you. I felt like I had bits and pieces of knowledge, and you helped put the structure together perfectly for me, and I know for a lot of other people. And I love the way you support your students, your ex-students, because you're always plugging something for someone.
Well, for me, if I can pass it on, so to speak, not just with education, but with being able to spur people on to live their lives, live their passion.
Yeah.
And if I can actually help in that kind of way, if I can be a mentor, on the level of being able to move them forward in their lives, then I'll be there. I'll be there for them. For
Absolutely.
Sure.
I know there's a lady that writes the newsletters for Sydney Astrology School. There was the lady that wrote a book, and I saw that you promoted that.
Yeah, Emma. Yeah, one of my. I think was she in your class? No, I think she came later. She came later, but yeah, she's written a wonderful astrology book, and I'm very proud of it for doing that.
When I get mine completed, I'm hoping there's a plug there for me too, mate. But that's not why I'm here. It's not why I'm here. Mark, I just wanted to, part of the reason I wanted to do this podcast, as I said, was just to speak about how things in life led you to, like into astrology, and how you started the school and all that type of stuff. But I'm always interested, because of my own journey, but other people's, is what led them to that point, what were your upbringing like? Was it a very religious upbringing? Was there someone in your family that's metaphysical?
It wasn't necessarily religious at all. My mother had what you would call a spiritual bent in a way. She believed in things that were beyond what was going on here on the earth plane. She was brought up religiously. I mean, there was a little bit of religion going on, but it was not necessarily a religious upbringing, though we were in touch. We were in touch with the higher power.
Yep.
And it wasn't that she actually taught that, but we did feel it in our growing up.
Yep.
Now, I'll have to go right back to the beginning.
Please do.
Because astrology came into my life very, very, very early. And it was around 10, if I remember rightly. It was 10 years old when I got my very first astrology book.
Wow.
So I loved books. I was a book kid.
Yeah.
And after school, when all the other kids were out playing sport, I'd be running down to the bookshop.
Yeah.
And in the bookshop and going through all the books, and I would always gravitate to the esoteric books, even when I was 10. And the astrology ones, there wasn't many of them, but there was a couple of astrology books that, I was drawn to. And I remember flicking through them, and I remember thinking, I know this stuff.
Yeah.
I know these signs. I know these planets. And this particular bookshop was pretty groovy. This was the very late 60s,
Yep.
coming into the very early 70s, and it was a groovy time. And the bookshop had posters of all the signs on the wall. So the goat was up there, the fish was up there, the archer was up there, the ram was up there. And I remember looking around as a 10-year-old going, I know you guys.
Wow.
They were like friends to me. They were like really, really good friends to me. And I didn't feel ever that I had to learn astrology. I
Mm.
just felt like there was something in me that was remembering something that I already knew. And so every time I was reading a book about it, or, just being in contact with it, it just felt like, I was being reminded,
Yep.
I felt like I was being refreshed. So that's how it started for me. It started way, way back then. I got waylaid along the way because I got into acting school, and
Yeah, I
I
remember
wanted
that.
to get, I wanted to get on stage. I wanted to be on screen, and had fun doing it. It was good fun, and I enjoyed it and made lots of really, really good friends. And you can see in my chart, there's a part of me that kind of wants to be on. So that
Well,
was
you
my
still are to a point,
well, exactly. That's what I'm thinking. That part of me is still going in a very, very different way, of course, but it's still being expressed. But astrology was always with me, even when I
Mm.
was doing acting jobs in between uh, takes or in between shows. I'd be sitting down with somebody and talking about their astrology.
Yep.
So I was known, even when I was acting, I was still known as an astrologer.
Wow.
Um, but it was around in my mid-20s, I was going through a time where I was becoming very in touch with what was going on spiritually at that time. There's a big wave, a big new age kind of wave at that time. And a lot of people might know the Course in Miracles,
Yep.
a wonderful manual, spiritual manual, came out. And I was a student of the Course in Miracles, because you can take it yourself, of course. There were some wonderful people coming up, Wayne Dyer, Shakti Gawain, Louise Hay, of course, Marianne Williamson, all these wonderful people. And I was really drawn to them and drawn to the way they taught and their understanding of spirituality. And I was thinking, I really want to bring astrology and this understanding of spirituality together. And the stuff that was around at the time was really good, but it just really didn't kind of mesh these two areas the way I believe they should have been, or
Mm.
or what I knew, I internally knew. Then I came across Stephen Forrest's book, his very first book that he wrote, called The Inner Sky. And Stephen Forrest is, the big daddy of evolutionary astrology. And this
Yeah.
was one of his early books. And it was the very first time that I actually went, oh, here we go.
Okay.
Because the way he wrote it, the way he worded it, the way he understood it, was doing exactly that. It was bringing an understanding of why we're here on the planet, what we're here to learn, our spiritual journey, and astrology, and how that actually entwines with it all. And so when I hooked onto that, all of a sudden my astrology went to another level.
Mm.
And at 29, 20, for people who might know a little bit about astrology, that's your Saturn return time, big time in people's lives, 29, 30. My mum passed away,
Mm.
and I became a legal guardian for my younger brother and sister who were still going through school. And my life took a major detour at this time. So I was pulled away from the acting side of things. And I had to kind of almost reinvent myself. I had to take my life seriously. And that's when astrology, up until then, I loved astrology, but I really didn't know uh, what I was going to do with it and where I was going to take it. And it was that particular time, with all the events that were happening in my life and everything that was dawning on me, and realizing was a big part of my spiritual journey and my astrological journey, that I actually went, wow, I'm really going to take astrology seriously now and throw myself hook, line, and sinker into it. And I'm really going to make it my life. I'm going to really make it my life. So that would have been around that would have been the turning point time for me, where I started doing charts for people. You know, I practiced and got it together. I was what is called self-taught.
Yeah.
A lot of astrologers are self-taught. And I slowly started to do charts for people, and I wasn't teaching. I didn't start actually teaching until much, much later. But yeah, late 20s into my early 30s was the time that I knew that astrology was going to be my life. Yeah.
Interesting that it was a Saturn return. If you think about the situation, and again, anybody that knows anything about Saturn and the Saturn return is often massive structural changes, you know, moving house, moving careers, change of direction. But I think one of the biggest things is you know, your Saturn, the Lord of Karma, calling you to do your work.
Yeah.
And not only that, you have the responsibility of obviously looking after and be the guardian of your brother and sister. Again, Saturn going, hey,
Totally.
Stop the party, stop the acting career. It's been fun, but
yeah, exactly. And you've got to grow up now. You know, you've got to take responsibility, which is Saturn. And Saturn's really strong in my chart because it aspects 6 planets in my chart.
wow.
And it makes because I've got a Sun Moon opposition, and Saturn is the T-square to my Sun Moon opposition. My Sun's in the 9th house, which has a lot to do with teaching. My Moon's in the 3rd house, which has a lot to do with gathering information. And so it had everything to do with what I had to do on the level of me learning what I want to learn, and then of course dispersing the information, disseminating the information, and using it responsibly and bringing it and making it a career. And so the Moon also, my Moon being in the 3rd house, you know, people who know a little bit about the 3rd house will realize it's a house of siblings as well. And my Saturn was squaring my Moon in the 3rd house. I mean, you can't write this stuff, can you?
No.
It's
people,
like so unbelievably pointed. It's like, you know, it's so real.
People outside of astrology look at us like lunatics at times, but you could easily describe that situation exactly as you just did. And if you did a chart reading for somebody, you might not know the exact way it's going to play out, but you could have pretty much predicted those themes.
Oh, exactly. And that's the thing with astrology. The interesting thing with astrology is it is tricky to be able to say this is what's going to happen, because things do happen differently for everybody, but the underlying energetic patterning or learning or whatever is going to be the same. How the picture is actually painted on top of that can be slightly different, but mine was classic. Yeah. You know, mine was textbook.
Textbook for someone who's going to go on and teach. So those initial parts when you obviously had to change, you were looking after your brother and sister, and then you started to do readings. Just because a lot of people I know, they're sort of in that flux of they've got a passion or they're changing, and sometimes they've got to do like another job and you know, do their passion and get that going. Was it hard initially to?
Well, I wasn't a full-time astrologer then. I became a full-time astrologer much later. Okay. I was doing a job at that time. Yeah. You know, I was working in a music shop at that time. Okay. to make a buck, you know, and to get my younger brother and sister through school, and so astrology was a side thing for me. I was learning astrology and becoming very serious about astrology. But it still wasn't my my job yet. Right. I knew in my heart it was going to be, but at that time I was doing jobs, and then of course later on I got into the fitness industry for a while.
Oh wow! I didn't remember that.
Yeah, I was working out quite a bit at that stage too. So I got into all those kind of things, But what I want to say to people is that your passion, you don't have to throw yourself hook, line, and sinker into your passion, like give up everything and just say, this is going to be it. And, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills. I'm just going to follow my passion. I mean, there's something wonderful about saying that, don't get me wrong. But I always think that you do have to pay bills, you know what I mean? You do have to pay rent and all that kind of stuff. So maybe there is something that you have to do on that level.
Mm.
But I want to say vibrationally turn yourself around, meaning that if you have to go in every day to a kind of an ordinary job, just to make sure that, to keep the wolf from the door, so to speak. It doesn't need to be where your focus is, it doesn't need to
Mm.
be like, oh my God, my job is my everyday, and you surround yourself and you cover yourself in that. Just go in, do the job well, but vibrationally turn yourself around to your passion and
Yeah.
make your passion your life.
Yeah.
And so therefore, at night time, on the weekends, when you have time in between, you just throw yourself hook, line, and sinker into your passion and make that the focus of your world. And so
Mm.
your passion is on your mind all the time. And you watch slowly but surely that job that's paying the bills will slowly start to diminish. It will slowly start to step into the background and your passion will start to take over. And
Yeah.
that's when your passion has wings. Your passion will start to move you towards that. And that will actually start to become the big thing in your life. And that's when it becomes your work. That's when it becomes your job. So
Great
again,
advice, Mark. Yeah.
it's a yeah, it's a slow morph.
Yeah. And so obviously you were going along, you're doing different jobs. The astrology part was growing. Um, did you begin workshops or well, we didn't have webinars then, but did you do a workshop first before you started the school, or how did?
I was, yeah, by my mid to late 30s, I hadn't started teaching as such. I was still doing lots of readings. And at the very beginning, when I first started, I wasn't taking any money for them because
Mm.
I was still thinking, uh, oh, I'm practicing, I'm still in the learning phase. And so I was telling people almost like you're doing me the favor, if they would, and then I got to about my mid 30s, around the 36, 37 mark. And people were saying, you're getting really good at this. Like, you've got to start charging. You've got to start taking a little bit of money. And for me, it was kind of like, oh my God, taking money for doing this, because I was still kind of, in that I'm still having to learn more kind of, but they were recognizing that I knew enough. I
Yeah.
was I was getting really good. And so that was the first time I started taking money.
Okay.
I would have been around 36, 37. And then that is what in astrology it's called the Pluto square Pluto time, for my generation anyway. And that's a big, big time of owning your power around that time, you know?
I, I was gonna,
And
I was going to say that, like, you owning the power around about a Pluto square. That's
yeah,
phenomenal.
yeah, isn't it amazing? And so that's when I first started taking a little bit of money for it. And then that's when I actually started to call myself a professional astrologer, because
Okay.
I was taking money for what I was doing. And then it was a handful of years later, it would have been around my early 40s. Um, in the early 40s, people who know a little bit about astrology will realize that you're going to have Neptune square Neptune and Uranus opposite Uranus. So it's the midlife change thing in life that a lot of people go through. That's when I started teaching, and I started very, very slowly again. There was a school, a holistic school that had an astrology strand, and friends of mine were teaching there. And times when they had other things going on and they couldn't do their classes, they would ask me. They'd ask me to come in. Could you fill in for me? And I thought, oh wow, I'm going to get out in front of people and talk about this stuff. And I was so excited about that. I thought I was going to just be doing readings for most of my life. I didn't really sit down and think about teaching, to be honest. And the early 40s was the time that with the Uranus and the Neptune got me into this whole kind of new understanding of what I can do with astrology in another way, on another level. So I would go in and do their classes for them and love them. And then I'd have all these students all come up to me after the class and and all going, "Oh my God, this was great. I really loved what you just said. And this is my chart, all this." And I'm thinking, I'm people are telling me I'm good at this too. So, so I was like, oh, okay, rightio, maybe this is what I need to do as well. Maybe this is it. This is part of it too. And then when you think of the 9th house and the 3rd house, where my sun and my moon are, they're the teaching houses.
Yeah.
They're the major teaching houses. And following my chart, I have to go, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to be. And so I started the school, a Sydney Astrology School, shortly after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I mean, that again shows the procession of, the major transits. We could say Neptune often related to perhaps spirituality and, you really finding that vision perhaps, and then the Uranus opposition bringing in the new energy. And it's right, Mark, we're going to start something new and we're going to give you the push to go and do it.
The Neptune square Neptune transit in the early 40s tries its best to try to get you spiritually aligned with what you've come here to do.
Yeah.
And that means something different for everybody. Everybody's going to have a different understanding of what that means, and of course, how it's going to manifest in their lives. But it's always trying to get you to realize that you're here, for a higher reason, a much bigger reason. And we all get so caught up, we all get so caught up in the day to day and having to make money and looking good on paper and, all our issues around what people think about us and all that kind of stuff. And then we get Neptune square Neptune that really tries to dissolve all of this.
Mm.
And for a lot of people, they get scared around this time because they think everything that's been real to them or they're holding on to, is slipping away from them at this time. But what Neptune is really trying to do is it's trying to get all the crap out of your life. It's
all the conditioning and
exactly. It's
the
trying
stuff
to,
people are giving you.
That's right. It's trying to dissolve all that. And it's trying to get you down to almost like your essential self, your true soul, basically, and then start getting you moving forward from there. And as I said, for a lot of people, this can be kind of scary because they don't know what that is, or they just feel like they're losing something, or they just feel like they kind of feel a bit lost. But from that place, whatever that place is for you, from that place, it's kind of speaking to you internally, it's kind of speaking to you intuitively. And if you listen to it and if you trust it, and if you do allow the flow of the second half of your life to start moving forward, you will really start to feel, oh, okay, I'm starting to feel like I'm getting on track. I'm starting to feel, because Neptune is always about the way you feel inside. When you're doing the right thing, when you're feeling that you're doing what you've come here to do, and you're becoming the person that you want to be, it feels really good. It feels really, really good. And that's what Neptune wants to make you feel like. And then there's Uranus, which is, the most radical of all the planets, trying to break you free from something, trying to bust you out, trying to get you to, move forward, but in a very radical way. So it's quite contrary, it's got that feeling of anything that you've been doing, that same old, anything that you've been doing, that you've been playing along with everybody else. You've been a square peg trying to fit into a round hole. Any times you've kind of betrayed your authenticity, betrayed your realness, it feels like Uranus is really going to shake the ground underneath you until you become your true self, your authentic self, unedited, unapologetically, outside of what people think about you, and crack that egg open. And so for me, it was busting out and busting free into the real person I was, which I knew when I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
But,
and I mean, a couple of things that I find interesting, the desire or the being on stage, which is really sort of being the spotlight, like here I am and people are observing me or watching me, and that come to fruition. But it would be interesting, like if you speak to your younger self and say, here's a sun and moon, 9th and 3rd house opposition, what's she going to teach?
And the funny thing is, Steve, that, when people ask you when you're like 5 years old, what do you want to do when you grow up? That kind of thing. I said teacher.
Wow.
Yeah, I would have been 5. And I remember at school, as a little tiny kid, what do you want to do when you grow up? I remember saying, I want to be a teacher.
That's amazing.
Isn't that incredible how tiny little ones in the first 7 years of life, we are so in touch with who we truly are and why we're really here. And
True.
something happens at 7 because 7's your first Saturn square. Something happens at 7 that kind of divides that time where we're in touch with our souls or spiritual self. And from 7 onwards, it's like, okay, it's like the brick wall is kind of put up, and we're in our bodies, we're on the earth plane, and we have to actually sort of start to understand ourselves as more concrete, more limited in a way, and having to do the work we have to do here. And for some reason, all that stuff that we knew before 7 disappears.
Yeah, that's really good point. I read a book that said something about the first 7 years is you developing your physical body. Maybe it's like you're physically in touch with the soul, and then the next 7 years you're really developing your emotions. And probably what you're doing is you're opening up to the outside world. So the wall comes down because otherwise it's just too much, and you forget about yourself, and you're interacting with your environment. And
exactly.
You forget your purpose. Another interesting thing was I remember when I finished high school and the teacher said to me, what do you want to do? And I said, I know what I don't want to do, and that's teach. that was from a high school perspective.
But you're doing that all the time now. You're a teacher too.
Well, yeah. I've stopped just currently, but I'm doing something different at the moment. So back to trading. But anyway, so that's a fantastic description of going through the major transits and how that played out in your life. So obviously, around about that early 40s, you started Sydney Astrology School. Was it all?
Yeah, a Sydney Astrology School for me, again, everything seems to happen slowly for me, like a morphing kind of thing. I actually started because when I was teaching in this school, in this holistic school, there were a handful of students that would say, oh, we want more. They're not, we're not getting enough there. And so a friend of mine who I was teaching with just said, do you want to take a couple in your home, and charge them, $20 a class or something, it was some, and just take them through stuff that they're not being taught at this other school. And I went, yeah, okay, I'll give that a go. And so, every week, once a week or whatever, I would take a handful of students, 2 or 3, that kind of thing, in my lounge room, in my home, and go through it with them. And it wasn't overly structured at the time. It wasn't the school. It didn't turn into the school that it became.
Okay.
But I was kind of teaching that way before Sydney Astrology School actually happened.
Okay.
And I was doing that for a little while. I was doing that
right.
maybe for a year or so,
Okay.
and then all of a sudden, my friend said, we've got to really start to get this more formalized. We've got to start to structure this a little bit more. And so we worked together, and we worked on getting it together as a school. And that's how it morphed. It morphed in. So I would have been probably by this time, I probably would have been in my mid-40s by this time, around 45, 46-ish. That at that period of time, it's a really important time in astrology as well, because you're at the end of all the midlife transits that you have in the early 40s. And so it's kind of like a place in your life where you're entering the second half of life. I always think that the around 45, 46, the curtain goes up on the second half of life, and the second act is just about to start. Also, by a technique that we use called solar arc, every planet's in your solar arc chart are all 45 degrees away from each other at that period of time, which is a semi-square. A semi-square is a challenging aspect. You know, it's half a square. It's a challenging aspect. So challenging aspects always rub up against each other. They cause a certain amount of friction for something to happen. You know, they try to work on something. They're action oriented. And so at 45, there's something that happens around the mid-40s that actually actions us into something else, through almost like a feeling of, you know, how an earthquake fault has stresses and stresses and stresses until it cracks. So it's got that feeling of feeling kind of pressurized or stressed, and then it cracks, and then you do something with what you need to do at this period of time. It's not bad. It's good. It's a really good thing. But I think 45 for most people has this real strong, you know, mid-40s anyway, has this real strong need to, it's like a knee-jerk reaction into having to be the person and having to live the life that you want to live. And it feels very much like a jolt. It's like a jolt, but at the same time, if you're ready for it, you know what I mean? If you're in the groove, if you're ready to move into this new place, it actually feels like a springboard. You know, it's got that springboard kind of feeling about it. So I was
froze there.
So I was springboarded.
Yeah.
I was springboarded into Sydney Astrology School at that time.
Amazing. Sorry, we just froze just for a second then.
Okay.
So you're saying that the square, the half square was springboarded you into
around
that next
45,
stage.
46 would have been the time that Sydney Astrology School really established itself as a school. And then I really established myself as the main teacher of that school, you know. So that would have been a real, I would say the sort of like the dividing line, if you want to call it that, from kind of teaching in a kind of like a unstructured kind of way into doing it for real. Yeah.
Well, I went back through my notes last night. I was just looking for some information. I was like, oh wow, I need to be reading this more. So the material is fantastic. So obviously you got the structure down pat, and then you this was 10, 11 years ago. So so obviously Marc was teaching from his home. Certainly when I studied with you, and we both have Cancer ascendant, so both being at home is always a nice place to work from. We're both doing this podcast from home at the moment. And I just found it was a great setting. Just being in your house, you have these big comfy lounges, you pull down the projector. You know, it was just really sort of welcoming, and I'm sure a lot of other students that were there, the same thing. So when did you sort of, well, obviously that Sydney Astrology School grew, the numbers grew to the point where I think at some point, obviously, I think you probably begun doing webinars or conferences.
Yeah, well, I was doing it like that for quite a while, the way you experienced it, Steve.
Yeah.
I was doing that for quite a while. And then, you know, big things started happening in my life again, transit-wise. I had a progressed full moon. My progressed sun was changing sign, and my moon, of course, was changing sign. And so it was going across the Gemini Sagittarius axis full at 0 degrees of both. I moved at that time. I was having really strong transits in my 4th house, the home house as well, and the midheaven too. We moved from Sydney. We moved up to the Blue Mountains, and I thought, oh, there goes my work. I was thinking, there's nobody who's going to come up to the Blue Mountains to get a reading. There's nobody who's going to come up to the Blue Mountains to be to be in my classes. And so I thought, this is going to my job, unfortunately, is really going to suffer. But I really had to do it. I really wanted to do it. I had to get out of Sydney. I went through a health crisis at this time too, which was a big part of the move as well. So I thought the only way I can do this is go online. That's the only way I can do it, is to go online. And I really resisted it. I really didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
I really, because I love the live interaction. And so I kind of thought, oh, but that's the only way I'm going to keep things going. So I went online and kaboom. I really didn't think anything of it. I didn't think, oh, I'll go online and I'll double my work, or I was just thinking, this is the only way I can do it.
Yeah.
And as I said, I wasn't thrilled about doing it that way. And then it exploded, absolutely exploded, because everyone was knowing about me now, and I could teach from anywhere in the world or anywhere in Australia. I was getting readings from people elsewhere as well. And it was like, it just catapulted me and my school and my readings into another, stratosphere kind of thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, from a handful of students that I had in my lounge room, I'm teaching roughly between 100 and 150 students,
Wow.
at
Wow.
the moment.
Wow.
And I'm booked for readings almost until the end of this year. So
wow. And here I was going to try and sneak in there, but
but Steve, I mean, for someone like you,
no, wouldn't jump the queue.
I'll find a little spot for you somewhere. But yeah. So I was just saying to you before we came on air, I was just saying, you've got to be careful what you wish for, because you've got to, and I'm thrilled. I'm so excited that it's done so well, and because doing what you love, really doing what you love, and it doing as well as it is, it just makes me feel that that it's possible. And I just want to let everybody know out there who's listening to this, that whatever you want to do, really and truly, whatever you want to do, whatever you love, it is possible to do it. It is possible to make money out of it, and it is possible to turn it into your life. It is possible. If I told people years and years ago that I was going to be an astrologer and I was going to make a living out of that, 90% of people would smile at me in a very condescending kind of way and go, "Oh, good luck," thinking, you know what I mean? Nobody makes a living out of being an astrologer. I know, what I mean? And even I thought back in the day that I was always just going to be doing it, as a side
On the
thing.
side, yeah.
I thought if I make a buck here and there, that'd be good. I didn't realize that it was going to turn into what it's turned into. But I'm saying that because I want everybody to know that this is not just something that just happened to me. This is something that can happen to every single person on the planet. If you've got a passion, if you love what you do, and if you stay faithful, meaning if you stay in a place where you believe this is what you've come onto the planet to do, and you throw yourself hook, line, and sinker into it, and you have faith and you have trust that it's going to work out for you, it will. I want to say it will. The only thing that's going to get in your way is you.
Yeah.
The only thing that's going to get in your way is you. And when I say you, I'm just talking about your belief.
Yeah.
You know, your belief, your underlying underscoring belief that, it's not going to happen, or my mother's not going to like this, or my husband's going to want me to do something else, or whatever. They're all the beliefs that are going to hold you back. Okay. So get all those out of the way, get all those right out of the way, and just get on that bus, on that bus, or in that boat, and just go for it. Yeah.
No, it's very inspiring, Mark. It's been fantastic to go through that whole process of from, an interest as a 10-year-old, which, obviously you brought in with you, past lives, through the various things you did, and then get to that stage, through things that had happened. But it sounds like to me that, you're in touch with the intuition at times. There would have been times when you obviously took risks. I mean, it's at some point there's a crossover where you go, well, I got to leave this job to have the time to do this full time, or, there's always a faith moment where you have to take a leap of faith and go, well, the universe will provide.
Exactly.
And it has. And I think I was thinking that even when you were talking about going online, so that would have been a few years ago now. In true Aries form, you're ahead of the crowd because, COVID comes along and everyone's online anyway, even more sitting at their home with time because no one was working, and you already had all the established structures in place.
That's right. I mean, I was one of the few people that really did well through COVID. I have to sort of look at myself as being very lucky there, because, as you just said, Steve, everyone was at home twiddling their thumbs and thinking, I've always wanted to do an astrology course, and now, I'm locked indoors, so I may as well do it. So during COVID, yeah, my school just went crazy during COVID. So I was very, very lucky. Yeah.
And a question I want to ask you, I don't know whether you have you thought about writing a book, or is there a book in the works?
Well, this is something that I'm talking about at the moment. I had a wonderful chat with Frank Clifford, who runs the London School of Astrology, who's written some amazing books, and had a chat with him about writing and all that kind of stuff. I've always wanted to write. But I just, to be honest, it's about the time, getting the time to do it. Yeah. Because, I'm so flat out with running what I'm running at the moment, that to sit down and really put time into writing a book, and a really good book, that you're proud of and well researched and all that kind of stuff, that takes a lot of time. So, I'm going to say I will, and I can see the transits that are coming up for me over the next couple of years that are all pointing in that direction. It's just a matter of me being able to, I want to say, structure my life, prioritize things, and get things in place so I can actually have time to do it. But yeah,
because you're also gallivanting around the country, and well, you're traveling overseas, as you said, and doing presentations. Did you just do one recently? Or was it coming up this month?
I've got one in Byron Bay coming up this month.
Oh, nice.
I'm doing a Pluto moving into Aquarius.
That's what I saw. Yeah.
I've just finished a mini course for Nadia Shah over in America. She's one of the big astrologers over there. She's asked me to do a 5-week mini course on the nodes that I've just finished with her. I'm doing some stuff for London School of Astrology as well, coming up in March. So there's a lot of stuff going on at the moment with lots of people. Apart from my own school, I've got lots of people now kind of wanting me to do stuff for them as well. So again.
And would you say that's consistent with astrology? There's a lot of astrology that obviously will talk about different stages in life, and people will say Capricorn is sort of like, the typical Capricorn of the statesman, the executive, reaching the top of the mountain, and you're sort of leading to that peak of, not peak as in you peaked, but leading up to that point where internationally recognized and well known and stuff like that. Do you see that as part of that cycle?
Well, I'm going through a period over the last year hopefully up until another year or so, with getting a lot of stuff at the moment because Jupiter is going through Aries at the moment.
Yes.
So I've got my sun's in Aries, my Mercury's in Aries, my midheaven's in Aries. So it's making its way up through all my Aries stuff through the 9th house, and then up to my midheaven, and then into my 10th house. So Jupiter is the great expander. It gives you more.
Yeah.
And it's looked on as being quite lucky. So yeah. I'm reaping kind of the benefit of Jupiter in a way, which I'm really taking advantage of. And I always want to say, when people are having strong Jupiter transits, to really do that, to take advantage, to put yourself out there, to be in the spot. So Jupiter can give you what it wants to give you. Because so many people are still hesitant, they're still doubtful, they don't have the confidence, and then Jupiter comes their way, and it might try and give you a little bit of a push, and sometimes you might do something you wouldn't normally do, but you mightn't really reap the full benefit of Jupiter if you're still kind of pushing in the other direction.
Yeah.
So with this whole Jupiter thing that's going on for me at the moment, I'm just putting my hand up for everything, you know what I mean? Knowing that, but I'm just realizing now that you can get too much from Jupiter. You can go to the party and have the best time, and get as drunk as you want, but in the end, is that going to be really good for you? So I'm thinking I'm doing so much at the moment and putting my hand up for everything. And I'm thinking, oh God, is this really going to be good for me in the end? Because, I've got to still look after myself as well.
So, the right use of discernment.
That's right. That's good old Jupiter stuff.
In mythology, Zeus was known for his partying, wasn't he? And he's
big time. And his indulgences and his lack of control, basically.
I guess if you're the god of gods, you can do it. Funny you say that. I've got a Jupiter return coming up on the 14th of March. So it's coming forward, retrograde, and it comes back. So
good on you, Steve. So a whole new 12-year cycle just about to open up.
Yes. And so, I was thinking, part of what could I give? And that was, I know so many brilliant people. But like we've spoken about, I like to get to the mechanisms of how you got there, because I think that's what inspires people. Because let's face it, we've all been there when we've had the idea, we know what our passion is, and life beats you down a bit. You can't make money, you got to stay and do that job. And I like the way you said, was just reorientating your focus. Even though you're going to work, your vibration was following your passion. And I like what you said, after work, breaks it through work, on the weekends, you're giving you full focus, and it's almost like it vibrates out eventually, and exactly. the other stuff falls away.
I think everybody wants it to happen now too. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, that's my passion, and I want it to happen now. I want to see results now. I find that people going through the process of developing it and allowing it to happen and bringing it into your life. When I say slowly, I don't necessarily mean years and years and years and years, but it takes a little bit of time to morph. It takes a little bit of time to graduate into something. And everyone's really impatient these days. Everyone, if it's not happening now, if it's not happening over the next couple of months, and if I'm not becoming popular and making all this money over the next couple of months, then why bother? And so if I was like that, if I had that kind of attitude way back in the day, I probably wouldn't have gone very far, because I probably would have thrown the towel in and gone. But the fact is that my passion was so strong that I just kind of went with the flow of where it wanted to take me, went with the flow of the ride, and enjoyed it as I went. And I want to stress that with everybody. I want to stress the development of it, and the growth of it, and the process of it happening is just as much fun and just as beautiful and just as purposeful and beneficial as the end result. It really is. So I think everybody needs to get that, because rather than actually jumping down the road and wanting the end result now and wanting to see what it looks like now, that just gets in the way of it happening. So,
and then you're often cast into situations that you're not ready for, you know, like
exactly.
You know, if that happened 10 years or 20 years ago or 30 or whenever, would you have been ready to have 100 students?
Exactly. And you often hear that. You often people say, "Oh, why didn't I do this 10 years ago, 20 years ago?" Because you weren't ready. You weren't ready. You weren't in that space 10 years ago or 20 years ago. You had to go through other stuff. You had to learn other stuff. This is the right time for it now. And really, I wasn't really the astrologer that I am now. That really didn't come together fully until my early to mid 40s. But from my late 20s up until then, even though people are going to go, "Oh my God, do I have to wait 10 or 15 years?" No, you don't. But I was doing it all the time. You know what I mean? I was doing it all the time. It was in my life all the time. I was loving it all the time. I was enjoying it. I was making a little bit of money out of it all the time. And by the time I was ready to become, you know, what I'm doing now, the timing was perfect for me. The timing was perfect because I was ripe. I was ripe at that time to be able to move into the, you know, the bigger version of my life. And yeah, I don't think there's any good in trying to race anything. There's any good in trying to make something happen, you know, before it's time. Enjoy the budding, you know, enjoy the growing.
And this
Really
is coming
enjoy.
from an Aries sun. I mean, we can feel the Libra moon going, just balance it out, guys.
I also think you can hear the Saturn squaring them, but don't you? That's more Saturn. The Libra moon is pretty much saying, you know, sit down and have a look at both sides. But Saturn is the one that's saying, you know, pull back, take your time. Anything worth it, anything worth its you know, its salt is something that needs to be honed and needs to grow. And you know, Saturn is always about the climb up the mountain as much as reaching the top. Yeah.
I remember when I first started teaching, I was supervising at the student clinic. Didn't get paid hardly anything, but fell in love with the old clinic of the college that I worked at. They had a beautiful old, you know, Federation style house. It was just a beautiful energy. And, you know, I first started supervising, I was only treating for 2 years, massaging, and I was amongst what I thought were gods. You know, people have been doing it for so long, and you know, you always feel intimidated because they were so good. But I'd come to the realization that students would come and go, and I was learning off these great lecturers and teachers and practitioners. And I thought, each term a new lot of students are going to come, and I thought to myself, I don't have to be like them. I just have to get better. That's what I thought to myself. I said, the new lot will come in and they'll go, "Oh, this guy's okay." And then the new lot will come in and they say, "Well, you know," and you would grow your knowledge and you would get better. And I was aware of that longer sort of cycle. And I think that's sort of what you're saying, you know, like, you know, you got to allow it to mature, you know.
Exactly. And that doesn't mean you're waiting around. That doesn't mean you're twiddling your thumbs.
No.
You're in there. You're in there doing it, and you're still, you know, you're still vibrationally in the field. You're still vibrationally in the process of what you love doing. And so you're not waiting at all. In fact, it's happening. In fact, it is happening right now for you. So, yeah. Another thing I want to stress too, Steve, it's a little bit off what we're talking about, but a little bit like when you were talking about being around great teachers and all that kind of stuff. Really important to be around wonderful supportive mentors. But I also want to stress that everybody needs to be able to do what they want to do in their own way as well. It's wonderful to be taught by wonderful people and wonderful to have their information and their knowledge and all that. But in the end, I always feel that whatever you want to do has to be you.
Yeah.
You have to be in there, you know. So rather than actually just being a walking textbook, you know, or just a carbon copy of somebody else that you admire, do it your way. Do it your way. Be 100% you. Put your flair into it. Put your specialness into it. Put your little bit of quirkiness into it. Try different ways of being able to do it, and that's going to be really, really important, I feel, to be able to always feel that you and your creative self and your individuality and what you have to offer is involved as well. So you don't feel like, you know, a robot. So you don't feel like, oh, this is what I love, but I'm just going to, as I said, just be a printout of somebody else. Make sure that you and your originality and your authenticity is in there with it, and play around with it. Have fun.
I like the symbolism of the transits too, you know, the Saturn bringing in, you know, taking responsibility, but the Pluto part where, you know, taking ownership of your own power. And then Neptune, the as you said, the release part where you're releasing all the stuff that you've taken in from other people.
Yeah.
And then the Uranus part, which you said, be yourself, be quirky, do it a little bit differently, or bring your. It's almost like that together. Those three together really sort of symbolize what you're talking about. You know,
it's great, isn't it, when you see how wonderfully important and how beautiful those planets are. You know.
Yeah.
They're really trying to get us down to. To me, those planets, they're deeply transformational in their own way, but they're basically all about freedom. They're basically all about freedom, and you know, we tie ourselves up in knots constantly. You know, we're our worst sort of captors, really, when it all boils down. You know, we limit ourselves, we intimidate ourselves, we're always coming up with things that aren't going to happen or we can't do, or you know what I mean. We're so caught up in keeping ourselves small and insignificant and down. And these three planets are saying the opposite. These three planets are actually saying, no, you're powerful. You know, you're actually an unlimited, unboundaryless soul, you know, who can do whatever they want to do. And Uranus is pretty much saying there's nothing in the world that can hold you down. You know, just break free from the chains and be who you need to be, you know, unapologetically and unedited, you know.
No, you summed it up perfectly, Mark. We're coming up to about an hour. I usually find that's probably about a good length of time for people to digest. We've been so good listening to your talk, to tell your journey, how you became who you are, and how you're still growing. I mean, I think that's the amazing part as well.
Yeah.
Is, you know, you're still going from strength to strength, and the effect that you have on a lot of people. A lot of the things you taught me, I still remember. A lot of the sayings you said. Little one, you always talk about find the juice, Steve. What's the juice in there?
Yeah. And I was saying that in a reading yesterday. Of course, there was this girl I I did with the reading yesterday. She had 5 planets in Scorpio, including the sun and moon.
Wow.
And that's what I was telling her. You got to suck the juice out of life, girl. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, thanks a lot, Mark. It's been
Very
fantastic.
welcome,
Always, yeah, so good to hear from you, and
been an absolute pleasure.
thank you for all your pearls of wisdom. I'm going to be listening to this again. I'm going to be putting it up in the next couple of days. And so hopefully all of our listeners enjoyed the process of how Mark described things, how he got into astrology, how it was always with him, the various things that happened throughout. And hopefully if you like that and or anything, any passion that you have, and just get into it and just do it, and make it work for yourself.
For sure. Thank
All
you
right.
so much, Steve.
Thank you. And thanks everybody. Bye-bye.